Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. This is part 2 of a 2-part interview I chose to air in its entirety, not only because the first half felt like the kind of drug misadventure that movies are made of, but also because this next chapter explores a transformation so unlikely and unconventional, it feels radical, and yet still bears all these tantalizing hallmarks. Won't you please welcome back Mark Christopher. When I met you 8 years ago, you had just gotten out of rehab.
I was still in rehab.
And I think you were, my recollection is you had an oxy habit. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
It's funny. We met maybe 2 or 3 times back then, but it seemed pretty fucking intense 8 years ago.
Oh yeah. And that was, I moved out to California to get away from the East Coast and everyone I knew.
And how long ago was that?
That was September of 2005. So.
And
14 years ago.
Right. And what did you come out? Do you have a job? Did you have a job out here, or did you come out here?
I came out here to see a girlfriend from high school.
Right.
Who I had just gotten off state parole.
Right.
I went to prison
for what? Or do you not want to say? You don't have to say.
No. So when after my entrance in that detox, then a couple months later, I ended up in my first rehab in New England and in Newport, Rhode Island, and then I was on this whirlwind of getting clean, going back to opiates, trying to get clean. And then I ended up out in Minnesota in rehab number 4 or 5 at this rehab. And in the midst of before I ended up going into detox my first time, and the girl in the midst of my big pot, smuggling days.
Right.
One time, this girl that I was dating, she went to school at University of Pittsburgh, and I drove a car that had no registration or anything. I used to launder money. I'd buy these used cars out of the newspaper with cash from drugs,
right,
and then take title, but not just take the title, but not take, not put the title in my name and then flip it and then
right,
get them to give me a check so I could
right,
just put it in the bank. So I had this Mercedes, and it had some bullshit license plate on the back of it, and I just dropped off 100 pounds of pot out at University of Pittsburgh, and I was running out of heroin, and I was with this girl, and she lived at University of Pittsburgh, and I was driving back, so I didn't run out of heroin. I was driving back to Philly, and I got pulled over.
Right.
And I got arrested for possession of, they didn't even know what it was. It was a pure rock, a pure China white. And the guy was like, "What is this, crack?" And I was like, "Whatever, dude." So they arrested me as possession of cocaine, and then I spent the night in a jail, and then I went for an arraignment, and I left. They let me go, and I got some fancy lawyer out, and this was in some humbuckle fucking
right,
hillbilly town in central Pennsylvania. And I got some fancy lawyer, and I went out there, and they said this was pure heroin, and where'd you get it? And I had to go to Pennsylvania State crime lab and say I bought it on the street. They were
right,
this
right,
is pure fucking heroin. Where did you get this?
Right.
I didn't want to say I know these guys and fly over to Thailand and stick it right up their ass.
I got a whole safe in my home at home, but whatever.
So I get a year probation with a big fine, and I leave there, and it was non-reporting. I never dealt with it again. I never left there. I never called them. So then a couple years later, I'm out in Minnesota, and I go to this rehab, this real well-known rehab, Hazelton, and I'm living in a sober living. And then I get an apartment with this guy, and there was this really cute girl from the meetings, and she and I started hanging out, and we all started using, and I went to see this dentist, and I was left alone in this dentist office, and there was a prescription pad on the counter, so I just graciously put it in my pocket.
Right.
And this dentist wrote me for a script of Percocets, and I told him I had this massive dental pain. I was out here from rehab and don't really know him as a dentist. I'm going to go back to the East Coast to get my dentist to do the work. Can you give me something to tie me over until I get back to the East Coast. And he did. He gave me a prescription. And then me and this chick proceeded to just write prescriptions for herself all over Minnesota. And Minnesota people were so nice and so naive. And I mean, we wrote this whole script pad. And then when it was out, you started calling in these prescriptions.
Right.
So my first real incarceration as a result of my addiction was on a Sunday night. We called in this prescription to a Target. Me and this chick. And I said, yeah, I need to get some Vicodin extra strength. One of my people like broke off his tooth or something, and I did something which I normally didn't do. I said, well, I didn't got a lot of anxiety, a couple of Xanax, like 5 1 milligram Xanax tablets, right? So me and this other dude, we drove over, and there was this huge strip center, and the Target was on the one end, and there was a cop car on the far end. I was like, oh, that's just
right.
Go into the Target. The pharmacy's all the way in the back. I walk in the back. I go up. Hey, I'm here. I used to use different names. I forget which name. And the pharmacist's like, yeah, you got that filled. I'll be right back. And he walked into the back. And I was like, waiting. I was like, you know what? Something doesn't feel right. Weird. And I started walking out towards the exit. And then this freaking cop arrests me, right? So, and I have a pretty bad habit. And they arrest me and... You know, charges are pretty serious, like prescription fraud, impersonating a doctor on the phone, federal, state charges. And I'm like, all I cared about was like how sick I'm going to get. You guys use methadone? Do they give you methadone while you kick in jail? Sure. And they're like, I need to go to the emergency room. You guys got to give me something. That's all I cared about. And they're like, nope, you get nothing. And they gave me all these charges and I didn't have any money. And and then I met with this public defender a couple of days later after I kicked and, in this jail, and it was Ramsey County in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I went to see the public defender and he said, you have a bench warrant out for you in Pennsylvania. Do you know what this is for? And I said, oh yeah, it was a possession charge years ago. And I never paid the fine. And he was like, well, how much is it? And I said, it was like, I don't know, $1,800 or something. He's like, oh, well, they'll never come out here to get you for that. But Minnesota is saying if you waive extradition and give them the right to come and get you, since you're such a knucklehead drug addict, they won't prosecute you. You just go in front of the judge. He'll throw the case out, and they don't come in 30 days. They'll let you go, and your case will be thrown out. Are you down with that? I'm like, absolutely. Done. He's like, all right, so just sit here for 30 days. If they're not here by noon on the 30th day, you can go. So I sat at Ramsey County for 30 days. Didn't sleep once. Withdrawing. I mean, slept like a couple of minute intervals here and there. And then I get to the 30th day, and they say, pack your shit. I think I'm going, and it's 2 parole guys from
Pittsburgh or whatever, Pennsylvania. Yeah. They're there to arrest you.
They took me back to handcuffs through St. Paul, Minneapolis airport,
Christ.
All the way back. And they put me in front of the judge, and he says, well, come up with the $1,800 you owed us, the $2,000 we spent to come get you, and you can go. And my family was like, don't give money. So they locked me up for 6 months. And
no way. Over $3,800?
Yeah.
That's insane. No one would fucking cash you out $3,800?
No. Everyone thought that was the best thing for me.
Right.
So I sat for 6 months, and I got out the day before Thanksgiving. And I thought, I'd always done all this bad stuff, and I'm going to do something good for the world. And when I got out, I went and worked for Greenpeace, going door to door, raising money. And before I knew it, I was the top fundraiser for Greenpeace in the United States. And
wow.
That took me all around the U.S., teaching people how to ask people for a lot more money door to door. And then I was up in Alaska, and one of the Greenpeace ships came in. And I hit it off with the crew. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to work on one of these boats. And they were all from Amsterdam and Rotterdam or New Zealand or Australia. So I did like a whole bunch of work with them in Alaska. And I said, I want to work on one of the boats. They said, well, meet us in Amsterdam. And when we come in, you do a full maintenance as a volunteer. And you go out as a volunteer on the next tour for 6 months. So a good addict, not using drugs, sober. Well, I'm starting to take medicine out of medicine cabinets, going door to door in Alaska, asking people for money. He said, oh, let me see your house. And, finding
old habits die hard.
So then I get to Amsterdam. Not the right place for a guy somewhat sober. I meet up with the Marine Services. Greenpeace International is headquartered in Amsterdam. I go and meet with them. They give me, they tell me the boat's not coming in for a month. Hang out in Amsterdam for a month. And come back and do a full maintenance on the ship, and you can go out on the tour. So a month hanging out in Amsterdam. Next thing you know, I'm back on heroin. Then I start wandering around Europe and find out they have pharmaceutical quaaludes. And I find a couple doctors that are totally into doing it. And the next thing you know, I'm eating quaaludes and cocaine in Europe.
Do you ever go out on that boat?
No, only up in Alaska. I didn't know. By the time that boat came in, I told them I needed to bring methadone out and taper myself off. And they were like, absolutely not.
No.
I'm
glad you tried. I'm glad you tried.
Greenpeace boat. They're not gonna. They're definitely not gonna let you. But then I started like this, like the whole thing that I did with the quaaludes. With weed, I did with quaaludes out of Switzerland and was shipping them in boxes of chocolate and started making crazy money, burning through it as fast as I was making it, thinking I was English royalty, like getting like $80,000 once a month and like buying all these clothes, smoking heroin, eating quaaludes, staying in fancy hotels, waiting for these guys to re-up.
Sure.
And the guys, it was just crazy. But eventually, I was thrown out of Switzerland when they caught me with a whole bunch of like 5,000 quaaludes in a train station in Basel. Made me sit for like 35 days and then say, don't come back here for 5 years. And, we'll drop the case and go get help. So I left. I kept going back. And because everyone wanted the ludes.
Oh, right.
And then eventually I kept going back.
Are there points in there where you're like, I gotta get well. I gotta live a different life like this. Because I mean, certainly the early ones that you talk about, it's like, fuck, I'm going to figure this out. I'm still going to manage this. I mean, do you still believe it for a long time that like you can kind of manage this addiction?
I didn't care. I wanted to just die. I really did.
At what point did you want to die?
Well, the first time I really made like a conscious effort, I found all these quaaludes in Europe, and then I was coming back to get on the boat, try to get the job on the boat in Amsterdam, and I was strung out again, and I knew I was going to fuck it up, and I got off the train, and these Turkish kids like cut off my like pack, and like had my passport and my money and my flight ticket home. And like my backpack, and they took everything. But in my blazer, I had like all these ludes and methadone, and I took all of them, hoping I was going to die. Right, I woke up in a hospital in Amsterdam, like had overdosed, and that was like my first attempt. And then after that, it was multiple attempts, and that's why like I know that there is a God, because I tried to end my life so many different times, and I never died. And I really believe now that the reason I've lived and the only way that I survived, because I went to so many rehabs and so many detoxes and psych wards, and as soon as I get out, money would be the number one thing. Right. Chasing money, chasing girls. Right. I was so attached to money being the end all be all of life. I just thought that was great. And selling myself short of what my core beliefs were, pursuing a creative type of life, of doing something to create something instead of buying something for X, marking up, selling it wine, just being a maggot to society. I hated myself, and the drugs were to what helped me.
All right, wait. Let me ask you one thing before we, because I want to move to like what's different this time, because I assume that that's what we should talk about. I mean, is there a point where like you've built this drug empire, kind of? You've got this big house that you've got this partner with, and you've got. I mean, does that all come tumbling down at some point?
Yeah. I mean, I sold the house and pissed through all the money, and then between 95 and 2001, I bounced in and out of rehabs, and I was still going back and forth from Europe, getting quaaludes and bringing them back to the States and making a bunch of money. And most of a lot of them were bought by those guys from that Stratton Oakmont, where they made that movie.
Yeah, Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, there was a guy that would buy most of them from us, and then he would sell them to those guys. One of the most painful things that I experienced, so I was going back and forth, continue to go back and forth, and bounce in and out of rehab, no matter how much money I made, I spent on heroin, and so in October or November of 1997, my best friend from prep school, whose older brothers like turned us on to like this exposure to drugs and the culture and everything, He eventually had gotten sober. And they sent him to rehab, and he came back, and he really threw himself into the program, and I distanced myself from him. And, one of my trips over to Europe, he had asked me to go over there. He said, I'll put the money up and split the profit with me. I need some cash. And that was like the first time he had reached out to me in a while since he had gone to rehab. And I was like, what do you need money for, dude? And he's like, I just need to have cash or something. So he said, don't fuck this up and don't do any blow. Because when I would start shooting, I was IVing heroin by now because it was much, it lasted a lot longer. And I went over there, and sure enough, I did a bunch of blow. And I fly over to Amsterdam, and I had this dealer that I got really pure heroin. I would get the heroin, then I would take the overnight train down to Basel. I would order the ludes, and then I would have to spend the night, and then I would get the ludes the next day. And now I'm flying them.
Yourself.
On my person, right? So the guy that I got the heroin from, he had said, I got this really good blow. Do you want some? And I was like, well, I kind of get weird on that, but just, give me like, half gram or a gram, right? So I had a bindle of heroin and a bindle of cocaine. And I used to always take like a bunch of heroin and a little bit of cocaine when I would do speedballs, right? So I was in this phone booth at about 2 a.m. in Amsterdam, and it's cold out, right? And I put, I guess, a bunch of blow that I thought was heroin in the spoon and a little bit of heroin. I put it in my, I inject it, and my hearing goes, and then my hearing goes out, and then my vision went yellow tint, right? And then all of a sudden, like, I start feeling snakes in my hair and bugs all over my skin. So I'm in a phone booth on Dom Rock, right in the center. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I strip down, butt ass naked, no clothes on, in a phone booth, 2 o'clock in the morning in the winter. Out of my mind.
I think I saw you.
And there drives a fucking Dutch cop car, little Volkswagen Golf, right? They stop immediately, right? I'm in this phone booth, like, it's in my head and thinking I got snakes and bugs. They're like, what the fuck is wrong with you, dude? And they were like, do you have any heroin to bring you down? I was like, I did some. They let me, like, shoot up, like, bring me down. And they're like, listen, man, just get out of here.
Right.
So I'm walking around, still a little tweaked out, thinking the feds are following me wherever and know what I'm up to. About 2 hours later, I'm like, okay, I can just do a little bit more.
Right. Good for you.
Exact same thing happens. Butt ass naked. The same cops fucking drive by. They lock me the fuck up, hold me overnight, and then let me go. Anyway, so then I go down to Switzerland the next day. I get my ludes. I fly back into JFK because it was cheaper than flying into Philly, and I get arrested. I had a prescription. I had them in a box. I was like, hey, look, there was only like, I think 1,200 of them or something. Right. And they were like, first they were going to let me go. And then these narcotics smuggling task force came in and they arrested me for importation of methaqualone. I'll never forget it. Mark Christopher versus United States of America. Importation of methaqualone.
Right.
Indictment. And I'm in this Metropolitan Correctional Center. I'm sick as a dog.
Right.
And I get put in a mobster pod where they had Sammy the Bull on the roof.
Right.
And they got all these different mobsters from the family. They put me above one of the crime boss, like, bunk bed.
Right.
Because this was like a holding center. While they'd been there for years waiting to go to court, and they were fighting it, and they purposely put me above this guy knowing I was going to be sick as a dog.
Right.
These guys totally took care of me. Got the doctor to give me methadone.
Right.
About 35 days later, and my friend, I'm calling him, and he's working. He felt bad because he had given me the money and encouraged me to go to this last trip. And I said when I got back, I was going to go to rehab, and this was it. It was like rehab number 35.
Right.
This time, I'm doing it, you know?
Right.
And I got busted. And they wake me up, and they bring me to court, and they say, we're dropping the case. You can go.
Why?
They just, I don't know.
Right.
And
I guess they decided your paperwork was
said it was
good
like,
enough.
It's like a freaking small-time drug dealer. He's not a carrier. No one would give this guy fucking drugs to carry. He's so fucked up.
Yeah.
So I went back to my friends, and he said, you can stay here as long as you stay sober. And this is, we're going into Christmas time, and he's getting ready to buy all these Section 8 houses from one of my other criminal, like, mobster-type guys, Jewish mafia-type he and I hang out. I stay sober. I'm helping him get together to buy these 51 houses from my friend who laundered all his drug money while he was at Drexel University.
Right.
The other Wharton kid who went to prison for a long time because they were importing and hollowed out law books to Penn's Law Library, kilos of cocaine.
Why has no one made that story? That's amazing.
Anyway, my friend and I, we go down to his family's house first we go to this New Year's Eve party, grand opening of this club. And the guy who invited us told us that the girls there were like working girls. And I had all this money. And I walk in and there's drop dead, super tan Greek girl.
And you're sober at this point?
Yeah, sober. This Greek guy.
How long have you been sober?
Well, I kicked at the Federal Metropolitan Correctional Center about 2.5, 3 months, right? And I meet this girl. She was so beautiful. We hit it off, and I thought they were all hookers. So I said to her, well, how much would it cost just for you and I to leave for a little bit? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, oh, these guys said you were a working girl. She said, is that right? I just met him at some Club Med resort in Mexico, and he begged me. I live in Montreal. I'm from Greece. And he said if I gave him money and flew you down from Montreal and worked the door, he'd pay me. Right. Let's get out of here. So she and I go back to my friend's house, this big mansion along this fancy golf club. And we hit it off. Don't even leave the bedroom for like a week. We're just, just crazy chemistry. And so then we have to take one of
Are you doing drugs?
No, sober.
Right. Wow,
totally
amazing.
Sober, just crazy sex chemistry. I get my friend's older brother and this girl to drive one of the parents' Lincoln Navigator down to the parents' house in Florida. And me and my friend Patrick, we fly down there. We meet him, hang out in South Beach for a week, and we come back to Philadelphia. And my friend is, saying he's sober, coming up on 4 years, and this girl and I, we're hanging out. We're staying in one of the bedrooms at his parents' house. This is a big, 20,000 square foot, estate, out on the main line outside of Philly. And so the morning he's getting ready to get all this thing, and his dad had started this bank, and they got him a loan to finance this, big real estate thing. And he was like, dude, you stay sober and you can run the whole deal, and we'll give you a salary, and you can finally straighten your life out and stop being a criminal. The morning that we're supposed to go to the bank and do all this stuff, I go upstairs and he's sitting Indian style and his back's to the door. And I thought he was meditating because he got really into martial arts and everything. So I close the door and I go down. He's on the 3rd floor of this house. I go to the 1st floor and I go in the kitchen and I leave. And they had one of these older convertible Mercedes that the father was trying to get me to sell. And I said, whatever I sold it, I'd get some of the money. And I took it to go get washed. And I came back and I called from the 1st floor up to the 3rd floor. And no matter what, Patrick would always answer the phone. He didn't answer the phone. I was like, what the fuck, right? So I walk back up. I open the door, and he's in the exact same position. And his back is to the door, sitting Indian style. And I put my hand on his back, and I immediately knew right then and there he was dead.
Right.
And there was mucus and blood drooling out of his mouth. And the blood... He was sitting Indian style on the floor, and the lower part of his legs were all purple, and the rest of his body were white because all the blood had settled. Yeah. And his face was purple because it had some of the blood still in it. And it was like, holy fuck, And his older brother was there, and me and this girl that was from Canada, but she had a Greek passport, a Canadian passport. We call the paramedics. They come, and then the detectives what's going on? And they put all of us in different rooms. And I'm thinking we had eaten sushi a couple nights before because I thought Patrick was sober. And I'm saying to the cops had found the paperwork for me being released from the Metropolitan Correctional Center. Sure. And they're like, we got an importation of methaqualone charge. Right. Got some girl, who knows what her deal is. Right. She's got a Greek passport and a Canadian passport. We got this burnout older brother flipping out, and we got a dead kid. And we're in this,
a huge house,
multi-million-dollar home in a really affluent neighborhood. Yeah. What the fuck's going on? And I'm like, I swear to God, I'm sober. And the cop opens up his hand. He says, the detective is like, you don't know anything about this. It was a couple of vials of crack and a bunch of empty wax, dime bags of heroin. I said, officer, I swear to God. He's like, are you willing to take a drug test? I said, 100%.
Amazing.
Yeah,
it's the only time in your life.
Yeah, right.
That's horrible.
I stayed sober just on that fear for about a year, but didn't go to 12-step meetings, didn't go to rehab. I'd already been kicked.
Right.
And then I just threw myself towards money. And this girl and I, we just had crazy sexual chemistry. So we were just using each other all day for sex. And then she wanted to get married, and she got pregnant. And I was
And what were you doing for money?
I was wheeling and dealing. I got a real estate license. I was
Right.
trying to sell like these low income Section 8 houses, and I was still moving weed here and there,
Right.
and buying and selling cars. I was always just like hustling
Right.
something, you know?
Uh-huh. So what finally changed?
Well, I had to move out of Philadelphia because that turned into such a nightmare for me. The brother like flipped his wig and like told everyone that me and this girl conspired to kill him. And eventually I started using again. When I made this girl move back to Canada, I told her I didn't want to get married, and she moved back to Canada. She was devastated, and I felt bad. And I relapsed 2 days after she left. And my friend, who was a total drug addict on the borderline schizophrenia, we went to Europe instead of going to Thanksgiving or to our families for Thanksgiving. We jumped on a plane. We used his. He was like his dad invented like some hearing aids, and
Right.
like he was like on the board like just for tax reasons.
Right.
And they gave him money, and it was
Right,
like
sure.
he was like fried from
Right.
LSD and cocaine at University of Boulder,
Right.
the University of Colorado Boulder, like 5 years of doing blow and ecstasy and LSD was gone. Like but so he and I went to Europe. We started using. Went to Amsterdam. He ordered a Porsche, I think. We went to the Porsche factory and started talking about that his sister had been dating the Pfizer in-house counsel, and that the people behind us were following us around to get information about the new drug that Pfizer. But I was like, dude, and he believed it.
I seriously don't think so.
No, but he fucking believed it. I was like, I gotta get out of here. And like, we came back to Philadelphia, and a couple days later, the Philadelphia police broke down the door and arrested us bothly.
Right.
They accused me of a wrong rape charge, that I was the wrong person. It was horrible. And it took me like a month of being locked up, and I had to get a lawyer, and it turns out that the Philadelphia police had like this psychiatric patient that said it looked like me, but it wasn't
wow.
me, from pictures that I had in the system from me being arrested
Right,
buying heroin
sure.
on the street a number of times. I actually sued the city of Philadelphia. But after all that went down and I got out, I went down to Florida and I got sober at a rehab. And then I got into day trading and started making a little bit of money. And then I lost all my money in one day. And the 5 years had been up since I was allowed back into Switzerland. So my best thinking was max out a credit card, go over and get some lewds, and I can
Right.
always sell them. And I did. And I went over there and I got a bunch and I made some money. I came back. I was living way over my head. I was living on Palm Beach Island and Palm Beach Hotel where people go to die. It's like some old, like, you know, horrible hotel on Palm Beach Island. But I had like a convertible Porsche, and I thought I was really cool because I was day trading. But I was, you know.
What year is this now?
This was 2001.
Right.
The NASDAQ's about to collapse,
Sure.
right? And I had caught the tail end of the, you know, video game, like on crack, like
Sure.
day trading thing. But lost all my money and some on margin in like
Right.
one trade. And then I went and relapsed after being sober for a while. And then I went to Europe and got some lewds. I came back, was like, you know, living off that, using again. And then when I went back over to Switzerland again to get more, I came back into the States and I was arrested. And this
Again?
time, and this time I had no out because I
Right.
had them concealed in
Right.
bags taped around my legs. And,
Same number of pills, like 1,200 pills?
There was more. There was like 2,400
Right.
or 2,500, 1,200 on each leg.
Right.
And then, you know, there was no way out. And I was looking at 5 to 10. And then my lawyer worked a great deal. I got 1.5 to 3 and I went to prison.
And where'd you go to prison?
I went to State Correctional Institution, SCI Cole Township in Shamokin, Pennsylvania. ET 20 was my number.
Wow. How is that?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was like no, you know what? It wasn't as bad as you would think. It was
Right.
like a mid-level security, not minimum, but like mid-level.
Right.
Most people wanted to go home, so they weren't causing any problems. They wanted
Right.
to make parole. It was like a college campus. This was a new built prison. All movement was controlled. You had a job. You know, you worked during
So you
the
stay
day.
sober in that place?
Yeah, I had a
Right.
great job. I had for being in prison, I had like a job. I was a clerk for a guy that was in charge of all the drug and alcohol classes. And I had to run the 12-step programs. And you know, I eventually got out. And I remember being on at the parole board hearing. And they were like, did you send the judge a thank you card and Christmas cards. I was like, why? And they're like, you got a fucking gift, dude. You got a 1.5 to 3 years for bringing Quaaludes in from another country, from Switzerland, and you're doing 1.5 years? And they like tried to get me. And I looked at them, and this is how you know how strong addiction is. I swore to my innermost self I would never use ever again.
Right.
I was like, this, I'm pretty well educated. I'm in a state penitentiary. I'll never use again.
Right.
And like, if we let you out, you have 0 tolerance. You know what that means? I'm like, yep, never use again. I swear this is it. I'm, pretty bright guy. This is like as low as it goes. They let me out. 4 months later, they locked me back up.
Really? For using? Because you
I was
failed a
high
drug
on-
test?
Yeah. Back on a heroin.
And so how long do they keep you in jail now?
Well, this time I was supposed to go back for the remainder of my sentence. They gave me another out, and they put me in another rehab, a parole violator, low-end rehab. I mean, look, the reason that I think I suffered from this so badly is because the solution, I always thought as long as I built the material world and got a girlfriend, that's all I needed, and just didn't use drugs. I just refrained from using drugs and alcohol, and I acquired material things. That's all I needed.
Right, yeah.
I did not connect the dots at all. Because, people say there's some that are sicker than others, and that, they use that label on me and everything. And what I've learned in the last 1.5 2 years of my life is that what it really means is the further you are away from whoever created all of this, as I got further and further away from any type of spiritual or religious or connection to the creator, to God, to the source, to whoever, I overdosed 19 times that I even can think of, okay, that I remember. Yeah, it's not fun. I remember one time in Amsterdam, I was with this whacked out French chick, and we were shooting up heroin and coke, and she was so scared of how much I was doing, and I don't know if I went out or anything, but I remember being in the back of an ambulance, and I had so much cocaine in my system and so much heroin, and they didn't know what to do with me, so they shot me out with Narcan, which exaggerated the cocaine, because now there was nothing keeping me down a little bit.
So, yeah.
And I went into an immediate, paranoid schizophrenic where I said, please don't do it. I know you guys are going to strap me down and cut me open and take my organs and sell them and leave me in a bathtub with ice and just to die. Please. And I started crying and I flipping out, and they had to strap me down. They were like, dude, we're trying.
We're not going to do that.
We're trying to help you.
So,
hold on. So multiple overdoses, some of them intentional, hating myself so much. Every possible modality of treatment that money could buy, I'd been through. And here I was, strung out. And eventually I went to prison, and I went to that parole violator thing, and and then I got out, and this really eccentric family said, you could be our dog boy to 14 Afghan show dogs. That was my job. I was on parole out of state prison as I was washing 2 Afghans.
Who's doing that job now? I want that job.
I can give you that job. You got to wash 2 Afghans, blow dry them.
That's fine. It sounds like honest work.
You're out of your mind. It was more work than anything I ever did. But I reconnected with a girl who lived out here that I went to high school with, and she was a lawyer and very successful, and my parole was coming up, and she invited me to come out here, and right when my parole was up, and I came out here, and I was like, Santa Monica's for me.
Right.
And I'm going to change my life. I'm going to get my shit together. I don't know anything about drugs out here. I don't know anyone. So I moved out here. I moved in with her. She opened the door up. Beautiful place right near Montana.
Right.
On 14th Street in Santa Monica. She had a great job. Did really well. One of the few, women I knew in West LA that lived under her means. And I moved out here. I really didn't know any people. And I started going to 12-step meetings, and everybody was really into recovery, and it was a really, really good thing. But I had no money, and everyone looked like they had millions and millions of dollars, and talked and dressed and everything. And I was good at playing the role of looking good.
Sure.
But I didn't have anything. I was living off this girl, and I didn't really like myself. And she got me a membership at the Sports Club LA, and she got me an Audi, leased me an Audi, and I'm driving around. I'm not even working, and I'm just out of a state prison for smuggling Quaaludes, And I'm with all these people in the entertainment industry and finance, and it's it was Vogue to be in the 12-step community in LA,
Sure.
So my network of people was all through that, but I still had no spiritual solution to my serious problem, my serious disconnection. I never felt connected. And I believe that what addiction really is a disconnection from people, a disconnection from the source, God, Christ, Allah, Buddha, whatever you want to call it. And it took me so much pain and misery to get to learn that, because, I pretty quickly adapted a way to like manipulate my way. And I was like, well, I know all these rich people back east, and now there's all these rich people out here. I'll get into the jet business, and I know how to move drugs. And we a couple times in Arizona, we had chartered a little Lear jet and filled it up with weed and flew it back. So I was like, I know a little bit about planes, and and then I just like used the same philosophy that I did with drug dealing into the jets. I'll just move people. And before I knew it, I was like one of the biggest jet brokers in the country. I was like known, and I knew how to wear the costume of the blazers with the pocket squares from Hermes and the H belt and the shoes that matched, and I could play the role and look like the man, and I was like the go-to guy for the jets now. Instead of lewds, instead of heroin, instead of weed, now I'm just the jet guy. Playing the role, living in LA, couldn't stay with the girl, then she gets pregnant. It's actually when I decided to make the jet thing my full-time gig is when I knew I was going to have a child.
Right.
But I had a lot of success, but I thought it was a lot more than it really was, but I was always used to having so much money from a distorted perception of reality from the lewds and everything and the weed. So I got a place on Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica, moved out after my daughter was about a year and a half and shared custody, but I felt like a phony. And I felt fake, and I still had no real connection, and I kept going back to the drugs.
Right. What was your drug of choice in those years? That was Oxy, right?
Well, yeah, it was very easy in West LA with a little bit of money and a pain management clinic in Beverly Hills or the Palisades or Malibu. I found all of them. They all know me. Every urgent care pain. I had so many doctors that the pharmacist alerted the DEA, and I got a letter, and it was so much. It was so hard for me to start. And but I would do the spin cycle out here, go to the fancy rehabs, and then sober up a little bit, and then throw myself into chasing the money and the girls again. And it was never.
So what finally changes? I feel like I've asked that question 12 times.
I'll tell you what happened. I really I slowly fucked up my business. I mean, I was always able to make money, but business partners or bosses was slowly alienating me. I met this woman who I became obsessed with. We had drug-like sex when I was sober, and I was having trouble getting over her. And I just was like, I can't ever stop doing drugs. I can't make everyone happy. I'm a horrible parent. Now I'm running into financial problems. And I just spiraled down, and I slowly started just trading everything in. Then I got 2 DUIs and totaled 6 cars. Thank God no one
was hurt.
No one was hurt. And I'll tell you what happened is I traded everything in, and I've been in, but by now I've been in probably 40 or 50 rehabs.
But when maybe you say even more. Traded everything in, what do you mean?
All of my material things I just kept trading in to get high.
Right.
So I didn't lose anything. Yeah. I made a conscious decision.
Yeah,
and taxes and credit card bills, they just went in the trash can. I just disregarded all that. And I
still do that.
I wish kidding. I hadn't. But I really thought that I was going to die. And,
and it's Oxy still at this point. Or is it heroin? Are you doing heroin or...
I'm doing everything that I can get. Yeah. Fentanyl, oxys, heroin, Xanax in quantity, everything. And I just really wanted to die. And there was a couple times where I took enough pills that I thought for sure, and I'd wake up. I mean, I was coming to in ICUs here in LA all the time with people from the program there, and my daughter's mother, and everyone would just look so sad and just so confused. And my one friend said to me one time, dude, either you really like rehabs or you don't want to get sober, because you've been in so many fucking rehabs. I don't really know anyone else that's been in as many institutions as I have. And everyone would be like, oh, some are sicker than others. But really what it was is I really never felt connected to anything or anybody. But eventually I ended up with a trash bag of what I had left. I had overdosed in a hotel in Century City. and I was at Cedars for a couple of nights, and then I came back to the hotel, and they had all my stuff in a trash bag and said, "You can't come back here." And I had nowhere to go. And I went to like
my God.
one of these like private, invite only 12-step. It really wasn't 12-step because it was a men's group at somebody's office, and I went there with the intention of them putting me up one more time in a fancy rehab or letting me stay at one of their houses or something. And they were like, "Dude, we don't know what to do with you." And they gave me a $20 bill, and they took me to Swingers, and they said, "Hang out here for the night, and we'll figure out," because Swingers open 24 hours. We'll figure out what we can do with you. I didn't know what I was going to do, and the next day I got a call from somebody that said, we can get you into one more, another 30-day rehab. And then another friend of mine who was a quadriplegic, he said, there's this Christian discipleship program. It's a faith-based program. He said, you might want to try this out. You can stay there indefinitely, at least a 12 to 14-month program. And I said, I don't know, man, but I was like, at least I know I'd have somewhere to stay for like a year. So I was like, something inside of me said, go and check this out, right? And this was an old hospital from the 20s in Echo Park that had been converted into like a Christian compound with like all these different ministries. And on the 14th floor was a Christian discipleship program. And there was no chefs or yoga instructors or 1,000-count, thread linen, sheets on the beds. This was like Army barrack quality 3-tier bunk beds, and you kicked cold turkey. There was no doctors, there was no nurses, there was no medicine. There was beans and rice and Jesus Christ 24/7. That was it. Like you kicked, eventually you went into the orientation, and you had a curriculum that you had to study and memorize parts of the Old Testament and the New Testament, and then you worked. You couldn't talk when you weren't working. You had to be studying and memorizing, and you had to go to sermons, and you had to do summaries. You had to read books that were all Christian. And I was like, whoa. Like,
wow. That's fucking intense. Into the monastery.
But you know what? It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I'll tell you this. I was on the third tier, or the third bunk, the top tier on the 3-tier bunk bed. And I was in the, like, day 2 of, like,
detox,
kicking. Yeah, just cold turkey.
Right.
And there was this old pastor that they called this ERC, where you kicked cold turkey. And it was like this guy who had lived under a bridge. It was like a meth lab guy, and he was like a biker, and now he was living under a bridge, and he like crawled into this place and changed his life and became a pastor. And he would like oversaw this part where you kicked. And I was there longer than I think anyone they'd ever seen come through there. Like 2 weeks, I couldn't move the first week. And I'll never forget it. He would go, "Good morning, disciples. It's December." And I'll never forget this long as it was, "Good morning, disciples. It's December 20th. You have 5 minutes to the chow hall." And something in that voice said to me, like, this is it. And the night before, I was seriously considering, there was huge windows, and it was the 14th floor. And I was like, I could jump out the window and kill myself and leave my daughter a fatherless childhood. I can leave here, get on Section 8 house, and get on methadone and just whittle away to nothing and drink coffee and smoke cigarettes and read books and think I'm an intellectual high on methadone. Or I can try this faith-based stuff and read the Bible and study, and I never did. And then the next morning, and I was really considering jumping out the window. I hit a level of depression that I'd never hit before in my life. It was going into Christmas time, and I'm in a homeless shelter. And
where the only way out is Jesus. I'm surprised you didn't jump.
It was, I'll tell you what though, the discipline that I developed, okay, of studying and memorizing ancient teachings and developing the discipline of praying and meditating. What happened to me was I began to gain a level of self-esteem, a level of confidence, a level of security that wasn't based on some having sex with some hot girl on a Gulfstream G5 or some celebrity chick or some playmate or, wheeling and dealing, smuggling drugs. Like there was a high coming in through customs with a suitcase filled with Quaaludes or weed. Those things were what I used to think, gave me my esteem. But I'll tell you, I developed a relationship with my God, my higher power, and building that discipline every day, honoring and giving grace and gratitude for me to be alive, for me to have survived the life that I lived. I began to develop an esteem based on that relationship that no one can ever take away from me, ever. No one. And you know what? I have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. I have all kinds of other problems, but you know what? I have self-esteem based on doing the right thing, based on honoring whoever saved me and what I believe my gift is. Like Mark Twain said, the two most important days of your life are the day that you were born and the day you find out why. And the reason I was born or that I survived all this is to do what I'm doing now, is to share my experience through all the insanity that I've been through, all the overdoses, intentional, non-intentional, to live and to be here healthy, see my daughter, have my mental faculties, to have a job back in aviation, to have a little furnished apartment in Santa Monica, but more importantly, to have a peace of mind that's based on a relationship with my higher power and God, who I call God through Christ and through what I've learned as teaching and memorizing things and developing a practice of meditation, prayer, being of service, helping other people. Like the recovery community, they have a triangle. It says service, unity, recovery. And, there's mind, body, and soul. There's Father, Son, Holy Spirit. There's Father, Mother, Child. There's wisdom, creation, universe. They all stem from the original ancient Egyptians, the triangle, the pyramids, were consciousness, subconsciousness, superconsciousness. And to separate the consciousness from the subconsciousness and the subconsciousness from the superconsciousness is through a practice of meditation and prayer, where you can separate your analytical mind from your subconsciousness and you can accomplish whatever you want in your life. It is an absolute miracle that I'm alive.
I don't dispute any of that. I mean, I made a joke about Jesus before you started talking, and
that's okay.
You fielded it really well. I
don't care.
And I can see you don't care, and that's amazing. I think, one thing, just like sitting here looking at you, I remember when we met. And you were in recovery, but I was like, that dude's bad news.
Were you?
Yeah, I really was. I was just like,
Did I have a blazer on?
Yeah,
with
you had
square?
your whole shit together. You wore this. You had this whole thing
of success, right?
Yeah,
like
and I was like, part of it was
genuine.
Part of it was that you were like I know enough about the economics of private aviation to know it's like nothing I'm gonna have or anything I'm doing is gonna have anything to do with that at this point. But so I was like, I don't want to like mislead this guy about, because people sometimes make this assumption that whatever, because you're in the movie business or whatever, you've got tons of money, but we don't. And but then there was you had this polish about you. I mean, you just looked different. Like walking in today, I was like, this is like I didn't recognize you, which I didn't expect. I expected you, because when I saw you,
you thought I was going to walk in here with a blazer or a suit.
I thought it was going to be more of that. Yeah, that
like,
kind of sort of like young Brett Kavanaugh coming in here with his sort of like white preppy privilege, and I didn't know what your message was going to be. I knew you'd have a lot of interesting stories, but like you really are a different person than I met 8 years ago. There's no doubt in my mind.
100%. And I'll tell you, when I was laying on that bunk and there was nothing left, I had a cell phone that was turned off, right? I had an old beat up MacBook Air or whatever and an old dirty Patagonia backpack and a trash bag of what I had left. I had hundreds of thousands of dollars of clothes from all over the world. I had cars. I had nothing left.
Yeah.
My daughter's mother would not take my call.
Sure.
My old business partners. I had one of the biggest books of business in private aviation.
Sure.
No one knew what to do with me. They all tried. It's amazing they're still friendly with me because I have a good soul.
Sure.
But when I was laying on that bunk, I had nothing left in the world. There was only one thing that was there. The only thing I had left is God.
Right.
And when I was at that point, I realized how much I really needed a God.
Right.
My way wasn't working. My way doesn't work. And when I stay in, I remember I left the discipleship program after about 5 months. I read the entire Bible. I memorized a lot of scriptures. I developed a practice of meditation and prayer every day. I still do it twice a day. I meditate 40 minutes when I wake up. I do exercise. I'm involved in different churches. I really enlarged my spiritual condition, my spiritual connection to the source. And I show appreciation and gratitude as often as I can, because I remember while I was in this place, I had some, I had messed up my back or my neck surfing, and that was like one of my uses. Like that's how I got all these prescriptions. Sure. I used it on my neck, and it still hurts to this day, but I've learned how to manage it without drugs. So I was able to find out that I could get disability for substance abuse, and there was a lot of people that were avoiding going to prison, going to this discipleship program, right?
Oh,
so they knew how to work the system and everything. And totally. I found out like I was eligible for the maximum of disability, and I got on that plan.
Right.
And after a while, I was like tired. I worked like the night shift from 10 o'clock at night at 5:30 in the morning. But it was cool because I could read the curriculum. You had to read 5 books of the Old Testament, 5 books of the New Testament each week. You had to write a summary on them. You had to memorize a few scriptures from one of those chapters each week. Then you had to learn a character trait. Then you had to write a review on either one of the sermons, one of the 3 sermons that you saw each week. Then you had to develop a personal goal. And then you had a reverend's book that you had to read that had a study guide. And everyone else in the place had like years of people going through this, like to copy it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was probably one of the few people, like I was sitting there and I was like, I'm going to do this.
Right.
And I would read it all and I would memorize it. I still have like every week I memorize new things because the practice of doing it develops an esteem for me. But I remember when I got out of there and I moved into a sober living in Shebbet Hills, and I was taking the bus to go to a physical therapist to work on my neck. I left mainly because I needed to get more medical treatment. They didn't let you leave there very often unless you need to go to the emergency room. But you couldn't go for physical therapy or routine doctors. Like you were, it was beans and rice and Jesus Christ. That was it, 24/7. That. But it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. But so when I was in the sober living and I find out like I got all these tax things coming after me and I got all these bills and I'm starting to get overwhelmed and thinking about, I don't even know how I'm going to get any money together to have dinner with my daughter. And I got on this bus, public transportation, which, for many years I thought was above me, So on this bus and I was going to like this, welfare recipient type, physical therapist that was through Medi-Cal. Mm-hmm. And I was a little bit overwhelmed. And all of a sudden, I had a presence come over me that was almost like someone said, dude, I got your back. And it was such a strong, profound experience. Like, remember I talked about that reference point that I had for the Beefeater's Gin? Yeah. Right? Well, this was a reference point I created with the presence of the Creator, God, Christ, Buddha, Allah, whatever it was, right? It came over me.
How interesting.
And I was like, you know what, dude? You're alive. You have somewhere to sleep. You got to talk to your daughter. You have a phone. You're going back to work. And I was like, wow. Like all of this stuff. I mean, we right now we're in Southern California, making a podcast about the insanity. We won the lottery, dude.
Totally.
We're in West LA, not too far from the beach.
Totally with you.
every supermarket, people all over the world, when they're checking out, they're picking up magazines that have pictures of people walking around these neighborhoods.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 different drinks or 100 different drinks to choose from in every convenience store. And the sad thing is, the majority of the people in this area are miserable. They're miserable.
It's true.
And when you have that shift of perspective,
but let me ask you
to
something.
have everything removed from me, every little morsel.
So, are you able, as a matter of daily practice, to reconnect with that sense of well-being that you experienced on that bus?
So, yeah. I mean,
how do you get to that place?
I'll tell you what I do. Okay. Now, I'm going to be totally honest with you. Whenever I put lust or greed, chasing money or chasing, my libido, nature of sex, and some of the, being on a spiritual path now, thinking I'm going to bring this spirituality into some unhealthy, spiritually challenged, attractive girl that, might have daddy issues, eating disorders, drug and alcohol problems, sex addiction, inability to tell the truth, need constant validation from multiple men. The type of girls that I always was, attracted to in the past, maybe stripping and escorting in the background, or they check all those boxes. I was in love, like in the past, and, but now when I make the priority, I wake up and before I look at my phone, before I do anything, I have a practice of reading. Like this morning, okay, I got up at about 4:15. I wake up automatically between 4 and 4:30. I read a bunch of stuff in the Bible. I read there's a cycle that you can go through the Bible in a year, and I read it. Okay, Old Testament and New Testament. Then I read a bunch of 12-step, the original 12-step program, their literature. Right. Okay. And then I journal. Right. For about 20 minutes. And this is before I try to not look at my phone. Right. Texts. Yeah. Or emails or anything. Then I either sit in my bed or on the floor, my hardwood floor in my bedroom, and I put my timer on for 40 minutes. And I have 98 different teachings that I have memorized. And I recite them in my head. And it takes me about 25 minutes. And then when I'm finished that, the next 15 minutes I stay in silence and I say, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God.
Over and over again.
I am that I am. I am that I am. I am that. And then what I want to manifest in my life, I say those things. And sometimes I do the meditation that's at the church down the street for 40 minutes. Sometimes I do it in my room. Right. But I begin my day every day with that practice.
And that practice brings you that
not sense always,
but it gives you the possibility.
Days, yeah, and then I actually listened. I have a bunch of music. Then I go and I exercise. I do the Santa Monica stairs, or I go to this outdoor, these fitness stations that are free at Reed Park, where all these homeless people are that I've got to know, and I bring them food. And I got one of them. I took one of them down to the place that I was in, and he was there for a while. And then he left, and then I just got him into rehab recently. But some days I'm so connected through the meditation, through my routine, that I literally feel like I'm floating. Yeah. I am so happy, and I have so much debt, and I have so much issues in the material world, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like me being alive. I'm supposed to share my experiences to teach people that the material world, if you allow that to dictate all of your decisions and all of your life, some people can get away with it. Sure. But me and a lot of other people, like the message I got when I was a kid, one of the quotes was, there's only two things in the world that love you, your money and your mother. I mean, that's the worst thing you can say to a teenager.
That's fucked up. What's your relationship like now with your daughter? I mean, has she noticed the change? Do you guys talk about it at all?
Yeah, she just was texting me obsessively about wanting to tell me about her early graduation present that her mommy got her.
She's about to graduate.
Gucci slides, which I think is a little extreme, but you know, West
That's
LA.
All right.
They were in Paris for pastry lessons over spring break.
Oh, wow, she's got a good life.
But no, my relationship with my daughter is better than it's ever been.
Right.
My relationship with myself is better than it's ever been.
Okay.
Because of my relationship and my appreciation for being alive, being saved. I mean, the life I led, I'm amazed I didn't ever kill anybody in all the car accidents and DUIs and the way I drove around, or, you know.
It's funny because I went to Georgetown. I had an episode of depression when I was at Georgetown. You know, nothing too severe, but one of the things that really brought me out of it was I read a bunch of like Christian thinkers, like modern Christian ethicists, and
Like C.S. Lewis?
no, it was there were three people I read. There was
Emmett
a
Fox.
guy named Niebuhr, not the famous Niebuhr who wrote the Serenity Prayer, but his brother, H. Richard Niebuhr, a guy named John Bowker, and Hannah Arendt. Between the three of them, it was enough. It engaged my imagination in a practical way to help me change my life. Not radically, but just it somehow enabled me to re-engage with the world. And like, you know, it's weird to have had in this day and age a sort of awakening that was sort of Christian in its orientation. But it's funny, the thing that you say also is
But see,
you talk about, hang on, this notion of the triangle and these three consciousnesses, and certainly everything that like I have been reading and studying and listening to in this whole process has reinforced that notion again and again, that like through meditation we get to shut down this part of the analytical part of our brain, and if we can sort of continue a practice of meditation, then, you know, this sort of the brain's default mode shuts up enough for us to live in the present, and shuts our ego down. Really, I said this on a podcast a week ago, but I saw Michael Pollan in South by Southwest talking about you know, that the opposite of spirituality is not atheism, it's egotism. I've just never heard anyone before get to that place through Jesus Christ, rice and beans. That's fascinating. I mean, I think it's
Beans
really
and rice
interesting.
and Jesus Christ. I don't know what I would call myself,
Right.
but I know this. Okay, I know that as I have made my life, the most of the time, 80% of the time, my priority in my life is being an appreciation, like they talk about in the 12-step program,
Right.
having had a spiritual awakening as a result of practicing these steps or principles, right? To me, a spiritual awakening for me was the rediscovering of the awe or wonderment or the appreciation of life as we know it, as what we have. I mean, it's a miracle. Einstein said either everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle.
Right.
I believe that everything is a miracle.
Yeah.
I believe that I'm alive, sitting here, is 100% evidence that there's a God,
Right.
that there's a creator. There's, you know, catapulted or launched into the fourth dimension of existence, or the kingdom of heaven, or bliss. There are moments through practicing of, you know, living right, being in appreciation of everything and everybody, loving everyone, forgiving everyone, being as best of a human being as I can, viewing everyone as equal. When I can stay in that mode of thinking, I am in the, you know, kingdom of heaven right now. I am in bliss. I there's some days when I'm walking around the bluff in Santa Monica and I go into St. Monica's church and I meditate for 30 minutes and I recite certain. I mean, I remember in this discipleship program, and I was like, man, I don't know. I started like finally getting some feet, like my legs under my feet. I was so depressed. It was Christmas time, and I'm eating in like a soup kitchen, and you have to wear these black t-shirts and walk in single file lines. You can't look at the women, or you're doing correctional service. And it was Christmas time, and it was like these horrible, like Christmas dirty ornaments, and like homeless people with like Christmas caps on, and I was like, what the fuck happened to me? Where am I? You know, like, and I was starting to get like really depressed. Like I felt like the biggest loser. And one of the like weekly things we had to memorize was, from the Bible, was a New Testament, and it said, I didn't have to memorize it. It said, I can remember this, I think it was yesterday, it said, when you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear. Sexual immorality, impurity, lustful pleasures, idolatry, sorcery, hostility, quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, dissension, division, envy, drunkenness, wild parties, and other sins like these. And I was sitting at this desk. Right?
It's a long fucking list.
Dude, that described my life, and that was
Totally.
2,000 years ago. And I was like, hold on. There's got to be something here, dude. They wrote this 2,000 fucking years ago, and that just summed up my life. And then it went on to later to say, something like, anyone living that sort of life will not inherit the kingdom of God.
Right.
But the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in your life: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I was like, self-control? I've never once had self-control in my life. I could never control myself. Any urge of anything that would give me pleasure, I just instantaneously, if it was pleasure and I was going to have consequences, I didn't care.
Right.
And I was like, there's a correlation here. And as I have developed just a practice of being in appreciation of whatever saved me, whether it's God, Christ, Buddha, Muhammad, Allah, I don't know. I do know this, that I have gained a sense of security and a self-esteem based on being able to stand up a little bit taller and be a little bit stronger of a human being, that's not based on, wheeling and dealing with the rich and famous and celebrities and rock stars and, getting them in their jets or captain of industries. It's not, walking through customs with a suitcase with like a couple $100,000 of profit in it when I get to the other side. It has nothing to do with that. It's not some hot, well-known chick on my, arm. It's just based on something that's almost like magical or mystical. It's what I saw in drugs that I never got. Now I get it. It's like the cycle of with addiction is like, when you start, when I would start abusing things for pleasure, right? As I did them more and more, the level of pleasure decreased. Sure. But the craving increased. Right. Yeah. And it's like, now it's almost like the reverse of it. In a sense that, like, as I live right and try to do the right thing and really spend time in appreciation of life in itself and try to value everybody and do something for someone that normally I wouldn't go out of my way to help or do, I feel stronger as a human being.
Well, and you also get more appreciation. You get a greater high off of less in some ways. It's like, you don't need a fucking mountain of cocaine to feel good. Like a breeze through the trees gives you that same sensation. I mean, I have found in sobriety, there are moments that have been as euphoric and ecstatic as anything I ever felt from drugs. And in your case, self-control, like through some of this, somehow you develop self-control, which is an interesting.
But I fall short sometimes, especially with girls. Like, there's sometimes, it's like when what was really difficult with addiction for me is like I would make like oaths or contracts with myself. I'd say, I'm not doing that again. I'm never going to do dope again. And I do it again. Yeah. Or I'm never going to text this girl again. And I do it again. Right. And the drugs and alcohol, like, those are off the table. Right. For me. That's not an option anymore. But I can't say in other aspects, sometimes the sugar. Right. Like I'll go off the deep end some days with cake. With whatever. Ice cream, cake, totally. Dark chocolates, peanut butter, or, recently is some... I find these desserts that are just insane. Like, and I go off the deep end, but also the sex. I mean, there's some women that I've had like just incredibly like ecstatic or like ecstasy type producing sex, and like I know that it's not a good idea that I have any interaction, and I think that I'm spiritually grounded enough to maybe handle it this one more time. And whenever I engage in that behavior, I struggle.
And how do you
it's almost like an eclipse over, they talk about the sunlight of the spirit. I'm in the sunlight of the spirit. It's almost like there's a pendulum in recovery where you're either in the sunlight and you're in so much gratitude, they call it a pink cloud in the recovery circles, right? And it's like you're in bliss, you're in harmony, you're in such gratitude and grace and in the sunlight of the spirit. And then you swing to the other side of it, and is in a darkness of self-pity obsession.
Yeah. Totally.
And it for me, there's never been much much middle ground. It's always been on the one end.
Right.
And I've been in the sunlight of the spirit and the grace and the gratitude, or I came up with this term, grace and space.
Right.
I've been in grace and space of appreciation and gratitude and feel good about myself. When I put some of those other lustful, pleasure-seeking, I used to be like a pleasure-seeking missile.
And how do you course correct in those situations? Like, how do you get yourself back into the light without suffering incomprehensible demoralization?
The strongest form of showing love is by listening.
Right.
That's the strongest expression of true love for humans and other people around us. So calling someone that, is struggling or that's having trouble. Service, meditation, prayer.
I must say, I find service, I don't think of it as a tool, but then every now and then I'm in this incomprehensible demoralization. And for whatever reason, I help someone else out, and I am relieved completely of my it doesn't make any sense to me. It's just like whatever madness I was struggling with is gone because somehow I reached out to help someone else. I put someone ahead of myself, and I'm completely relieved of the madness. Mark, this was amazing. I did not know what I was getting into. I was very skeptical coming into this conversation, but it was entertaining, and it was profoundly revelatory. It was long. I don't know what we're going to do about that, but it was certainly well worth it. Thank you very much. If you've come this far, please consider heading over to my Patreon page and just tossing $1 in the bucket. Thanks so much. Drunkalogs cover art is designed and created by John DeManil, and the Drunkalogs theme song is composed and performed by Stephen Stout. I am Nick Morton.